Hey everybody, welcome back to another illustrious episode of the Over Sharon Show, the best darn show on the internet. I've realized that I probably used the same adjectives a few times, so I had to switch them up a little bit. We're going with
Illustrious. I noticed.
illustrious, illuminating even. Illuminating, am I right, everyone? Anyway, we're really excited about our returning guest today. Excuse me, but before we get into that, we're going to read today's quote. Actually, Sharon's going to read today's quote, and I'm going to pull a card. Go ahead.
Indeed. This quote is by Friedrich Nietzsche, and it says, there are two different types of people in the world, those who want to know and those who want to believe. Or shall we say, those who want to know and those who want to believe.
Yeah.
I really, really like that. It's very thought provoking.
Yeah, it reminds me of the different personality types that we have also that we've been discussing a lot with our good friend Joe behind the scenes. Yeah, but our guest today, I'm going to bring him in really quick to see if he has any thoughts on the quote. But our guest today is Nick. He's no stranger to anyone who's a fan of this show. And
And he thinks he's an INFP. Sorry to interrupt.
he's an INFP. No problem. What do you think about that quote there, Nick?
I think I believe that I am an INFP. That's what I think. No, I really I like that quote a lot. I like quotes like that which break it down into false binary on purpose. That are it makes you think a lot more. Like
Yeah.
when you simplify things, it's like a weird thing that happens where you think that you wouldn't think as much, but you do. You think a
Yeah.
lot more when you simplify.
Absolutely. And like, I like how you said the false binary because it's like, there are only two types of people in the world.
Yeah.
And you've seen those funny memes. Those are funny.
I love them. Yep.
Yeah,
I
and
can't think of a good one, so I didn't say.
I also hang on, I'm gonna look back at this quote again, but I love how it's like want and it uses the word want to know
Mm,
and
hmm.
want to believe. So it
Yes.
really makes you think about like it's not saying that there's only people who believe and people who think, right?
Or no.
Step behind it. Anyway.
Let's see. You want to look at it?
Oh, I'll bring it. I
Two
was just
different types of people.
back up.
Well, I'm just looking at it. Two different types of people in the world, those who want to know and those who want to believe. So, well, knowing is something Brandon and I have talked about since one of the early episodes. And I kind of broke it down like I had heard someone say before that, like you see in the Bible, like Adam knew his wife, Eve, and you don't know someone unless you've experienced it. So he experienced his wife. And so knowledge comes from experience. So those who want to know, I'm assuming in this case, is those who want to experience something to have the knowledge. And then you have the people who want to believe. And to me, that would just be a blind belief of like, well, I believe, um, without actually truly um, having the experience to know that it actually is true and valid for you or whatever.
Yeah, it's like they don't want to actually have the experience. They just want to have the knowing without the experience, right? They're taking someone else's word for it. That's
Exactly.
we get so deep on this over Sharon show.
So, with that said, and with the um, note that Nick said he believes he's an INFP, it's probably because he hasn't yet delved in deep to the MBTI to actually experience all the detail behind it because it is very detailed. And I've been actually trying to dive in a little bit. And Joe is mind blowingly leagues ahead of me on this, but he'll explain things to me. And I'm just like, whoa, like that there's so many levels to this. that but until I can really pinpoint and say, these are the exact cognitive functions that you were using right now, and that's what makes you an INFP, right? But I can't know that until I've actually studied the person and their language and their behavior to know exactly what they are representing.
I'm glad that you said that last word there, representing, because I was going to say that as well.
Wow.
I said I believe I am, first off, because I don't know nearly as much as you guys do about it. I've looked at personality types before, and like uh, INFP does read like a biography of me, but then I also go, is it reading who I actually am or just who I am right in this moment based
Mm.
on all of my traumas, all of my everything that I choose to put out into the world? And a lot of people don't stop and really think about that. Are you like, if you're taking one of those personality type tests, are you basing your answers on the little quizzes on who you really are or the person that you project into the world? It's pretty fascinating. It's a
Oh,
lot
yeah,
deeper than people really think about.
absolutely. And to the point you were saying about like who I am or who I like, after all these traumas, who I am now, blah, 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 right? I also had the same thoughts about those kinds of things. Um, and I'm coming to see that it's your, I mean, if you've healed a lot of the things that cause the quote negative type of behaviors, it doesn't make you not an INFP. Let's just say that you were, right? That we had determined all the examples and said, yeah, this is very much 99.9% accuracy that he's an INFP. Then it would manifest a little differently based on how much healing you've done. But you'd still be an INFP. It would just be harder to identify you as an INFP because of all the changes that you've made. So,
Yeah, totally.
It also depends on like the model that you're looking on, because this, just like anything else, there's like a mainstream approach to it where you don't get all this stuff and they try to just like herd people into different categories. And then there's a more just a different look at it, I guess. Like C.S. Joseph is one of these guys, but he's following someone else's work. I can't remember
he
exactly.
takes a lot of people's work. C.S.
Yeah.
Joseph has taken a lot of people's work and kind of merged together. And then sometimes he changes the terminology. So, and sometimes he doesn't explain that he's done that. So it's hard to tell sometimes. But yeah, he's gone very deep. But yes, like you said, there's a lot of people looking at this from different kind of a little bit different angles, and then they'll change the names and terminologies of things. So yeah, it depends on what you're looking at in that regard too.
And I think also that the misidentification comes in is just what Nick said, because people answer the questions based on the best version of themselves. Like they're trying to just impress people or whatever it is, and the way that CF Joseph, I guess, teaches it, or other people teach it too, is that you can, by people's actual behavior, you could, like, by the way they talk and the phrases that they use, you can usually type them. Yeah.
Yeah, and using other people's observations, not just your biased observation of yourself.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and the fact that when you have, like, let's say you're an INFP, or let's just use me as an example, because I'm allegedly, from everything that I've looked into, I'm an ENTJ. Now, I need to like have evidence to prove it, but I haven't done that yet, but allegedly. So there are shadow aspects of the ENTJ, and those manifest as other personalities. So like the next one, my shadow, which I think the next one is the subconscious, is an INTP, which is Brandon. And that's funny because it's probably why we probably get along, because like he's basically my shadow,
Yeah, and I think it
my
works
shadow
actually
function.
too the other way around because Joe was telling me about that. So you would be my shadow function as well, which, and I brought this up too, and we've talked about this on the show where I feel like we might not get along if we both hadn't done work on ourselves because the way that we could be opposite in certain ways
Right.
when we do when, since we did work and we're not victims as much as we used to be. Um,
Hmm.
I think that we're able to work better because of that, and we can understand each other now. Because I think before, if you have something in your shadow, generally it's something you deny about yourself, right? Or something that you're not all right with. So you might see it out in the world and you might criticize it because it's
Hmm.
like a classic projection, right? So
You
that would
might
be,
judge it. Right.
yeah. And that would be a reason why we wouldn't get along if we both were, you know, slobs. No. You know what I mean? The profane. Now, if we both weren't didn't do some work and take a look at our victim status and all that stuff.
I
So
feel like we're doing an intro to our MBTI episode, which maybe one day we'll do.
yeah, it's like a preview. Yeah, we'll get Joe on once he's ready because he said he went hardcore into that. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, me too.
Awesome. Well, I pulled a tarot card, so we should probably talk about that. In the deck I'm using today here, I'm going to highlight myself so everybody could see. I'm using the Influence of the Angel tarot, which I really recommend for anyone that has a Christian kind of background, which most listeners to the show have, and or if you're into Christ or whatever, because it has a lot of the same archetypes with the angels and stuff. Let me see if I can block this light. The lighting in here is too good, I guess, guys. Sorry. All right. So anyway, Ten of Wands. You see, it's a guy holding a bunch of wands, look like matchsticks, like large
They
matchsticks,
do.
and then there's an angel over there off to the side. Some nice shading. There you go. Ten of Wands. All right, back. Yeah, I really like this deck. It's really cool. We've used it in the past, but it's been a while.
Yeah, tens are about kind of like completion, right? Right before you start new new things.
Yeah, it's like the end of a cycle a lot of times. I mean, I could even read what it says in here if you want. Let's do it
Sure.
because they're these this book
And
I think
it's
is really good too.
wands are about fire, about action.
Yeah, creation, all that fun
Mhm.
stuff. All right, so Ten of Wands. Tens take the intrinsic meaning of the suit and show it in abundance. Symbols, wands. So it's going to talk about all the symbols in here. So the wands represent commitments, activities, projects, or anything else that requires someone's attention and energy. Because there are so many, they also represent burdens. Generally, wands represent energy. Energy is most effective when it's concentrated and less effective when it's dispersed. Just because there's more of it in quantity doesn't automatically mean it's more powerful and effective. In this context, the wands represent the man's energy capacity and what he's able to expend on each wand, commitment, activity, or project. So the man is quite adept at handling the 10 wands, and he has enough energy to carry them all. This represents the capacity to take on multiple responsibilities and the abilities to manage life's burdens. But perhaps that man has taken on too much. He can't see the road ahead and has perhaps lost sight of his ultimate destination. Additionally, he can't give too much focused attention to each individual wand, commitment, activity, or project because there are too many of them. Each situation is maintained, but they're not necessarily thriving. Distraction can occur when too much is going on, and the reason why something was originally taken on, the motivating spark, is often forgotten. The road, path, or action a person takes to reach a goal or to get something done. The road also symbolizes intention and purpose. The wall defines, let's see, helps define the path, represents a way to stay undistracted and focused. House in the distance, it represents the destination or the goal. The direct meaning, the ability to handle many things at once, involved with multiple projects or activities, managing life's responsibilities. Being so caught up in doing something that you forget why you're doing it. All right. In doing, let's see, involved with many things, but doing none of them well. The need to focus on just one thing. So it has multiple different meanings, and then it gives a shadow meaning here. Stop and smell the roses. The angelic message, which is the final thing, lighten your load so that you may see the path more clearly. Interesting.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible. As always, that is spot on with a lot of the stuff that I have to talk about today. So I just am smiling because it's every time I come on here, the card that gets pulled is like it it's like the basis of what I come on to talk about, which is hilarious. And today, let's talk about trauma again, and
Woo.
childhood trauma, and more specifically, I was talking to Sharon, and we thought it would be a good idea to have this conversation. I think it's going to be incredibly fun to kind of delve into some of the reasons why people get wrapped up in, for lack of a better term, cults. And those could be in person or online. Um, what is actually happening on like a subconscious level that drives somebody to get involved in that? So, you guys have any thoughts? Go for it. If not, I'll lay out my hypothesis, and then we can just
Oh, you're
riff from
muted,
there.
Sharon. Sharon, you're muted.
Sorry, I was just going to mention quickly that we all wore green today and we did not plan this.
Yes, we did. Which is funny because we're going to be talking about childhood trauma, and we will be talking about how healing that trauma is imperative to getting out of a cult and making sure that don't get duped into joining another one. And that involves healing. And in all, Eastern, whatever, Eastern medicine, Eastern religion, everything, green is the heart chakra, and it's all about healing. So
Yes.
Um,
things are lining up again, guys, as they do every time we talk.
what a
Indeed.
surprise. I did want to mention before we get started on the topic of cults that the way that I view cults is really, if you look at the word culture, and I'm sure some people are familiar with this though, but culture and cult, it's pretty much the same thing. Cult's just like a shortening of it. And we have this culture, right, around our collective consciousness. So most people in the United States have an idea of all the same kind of things. It used to be a little different. I remember in the 90s when I would travel around, like when I was in the Marines and stuff, it was different places that you went. But now when you go, I mean, there's still a lot of differences, but a lot of people talk very similar now. And, there's a lot of the same restaurants and corporations and all this stuff everywhere. A lot of the same music tastes and stuff like that, whereas it used to be a little different. So when I talk about things like cult and cult culture, um, really what we're talking about is just a way for people to interact in society in a certain way. So with what comes along with that is like jargon and different words and different traditions, I guess you could say, and customs and all these things that we do. And you know,
Ideologies
yeah,
and
ideology,
Behaviors.
dogmas.
yeah,
Yeah.
behaviors for sure, right? And when we're talking about cults and internet cults, what happens I see sometimes is people, not just the big culture, they'll throw that away and then they adopt their own culture outside of that culture. It's kind of counterculture. And that's when it becomes a cult. And I think the reason that they're demonized so heavily is because that they compete with the big culture. And I'm not saying cults are a good thing by any means, but I don't think it's a bad thing to get out of the culture or to be against the culture, or maybe, like as Jesus says, you're of the world, or you're in the world, not of it, right? You want to be, yeah, there you go. That's it. And so that's kind of all I wanted to say about internet cults. The reason why I sure we all see the issues here is that some of the behavior can become negative or
Toxic.
dangerous or toxic to the people involved. Yeah, and it just really causes more division. And what are we against here more than anything else on the Oversharing show? Division. We've been talking about it for years now, literally. I could say that. So, yeah, I just wanted to give a little definition, kind of what I mean. Yeah, go ahead, Sharon, if you want to say
And I
something.
have a little caveat about your word division,
Yeah.
because Jesus said, I came to bring a sword, right? So, and he doesn't mean it in a harmful way because the truth divides, right? So when we say we're against division, we mean the type that is that has animosity, is angry, and trying to fight with each other, trying to have arguments and debates and discussions. That's the kind that we dislike because it's not productive. When Jesus said he came to bring a sword, which divides, it's that when we speak truth, the people who dislike truth will be upset. And that's all he meant. So that we're not talking about that kind of division.
Or could it even be that he meant, that's definitely one way because you're totally right about speaking truth. But could it also have been, I bring a sword for you to cut yourself away from this with the truth? Because a lot of times with the truth, you have to be quiet because it is one of the most offensive things ever. And you don't want to end up on a cross, right? So, so
Yeah, I think it's because Jesus said, I came not to bring peace, but a sword. I said something like that.
yeah, yeah. But I'm just saying, if you look at the way, just the way you can kind of esoterically, I guess, look at these words,
Yeah.
would also have that meaning if you apply it internally, right? Like a sword for you to sever your ties. And really, all that can mean is just attachments, right? So you could still interact with people, but you don't have to be like, I'm the smartest one in this group. I know what's going on, and they're going to know it too. You could just be like, hey, Uncle Brandon's over to hang out. What's going on, everybody? We went to the moon. It was cool. Like sometimes you have to just step back and let things go. And I'm not saying you should lie or whatever, agree with it. You just remain silent, right? Those who know don't talk. Those who talk don't know. That's all I meant.
And just as a side note, the where Jesus says not peace but a sword, that whole thing is in Matthew 10:34-36. I just did an online search, and Luke 12:51. It appears to be. So that's what the internet's telling me right now. So
Beautiful.
What the F is the internet? No.
Yeah, you guys, I appreciate what you guys just said, those caveats, and it's really true. I think the reason that cults never work, literally never, they work for a time and then they all eventually crumble and fall is because they are so heavily invested in as Sharon said, division, but then also like Brandon touched on, 100% of the time they go from focusing on what they do like, we're going to be counterculture. We don't like what the culture is doing, so we're going to create our own thing. And then typically within a matter of years, it's no longer about focusing on those good things that they want to prop up in their own culture, their own created culture. It's now everybody else is evil, and 100% of our energy goes into trying to convince everybody in the cult how evil everybody else is. This is usually done at the top so that the leader of this cult, can become your new messiah. And it is that's why they never work, because it's not about the actual culture being created. That's a farce. That's a facade. That is a show put on to get eyes on the cult leader.
I wanted to just quickly say too that it is very reminiscent of a narcissistic relationship because it starts off, oh, the good, the true, and the beautiful. This is amazing. We're all about goodness and about truth and about God and about whatever, right? But over time, it starts to deteriorate, and there's lots of gaslighting going on, lots of people going, but I thought this is good. Is this what good is? Is this what beautiful is?
Yep.
And it's literally the narcissistic relationship. Because the other person on the other side starts to question themselves. And sometimes if there's trauma that has not been healed, they will remain in the relationship thinking, I must be the crazy one. If, this is supposed to be about good, true, and beautiful. Let's go back to that. Maybe if I stay, things will change and we'll go back to the good, the true, and the beautiful. But it's like a narcissistic relationship. And if the trauma is not healed, the person will stay. It's all individual, each person.
100%. Yeah, and it's that gaslighting that gets people to stay because they go, "Oh, well, the cult leader told me that there's something wrong with me because I enjoy X, Y, or Z." So obviously they know the answer to how I'm going to be able to heal myself from liking this thing that they have now deemed bad. So now I have to stay into this cult for, however long so that I can get their divine wisdom of how to heal myself. And that is the root of what I wanted to speak about today, right there. So I'm glad that you tied that in
Oh,
perfectly.
awesome. Really quickly, I wanted to add too, like, I think that some of these cults, they come along and they're not even planned. Like, I think a lot of this stuff happens spontaneously. It's kind of like the way that I view what's going on in the government, in the world and stuff. So many people think there are all these controllers in a dark room, every single thing that happens. Whereas I think it's human behavior that leads it. Like the news is fake, right? Everyone will say news is fake. Well, why is the news fake? Is it somebody saying that's what we should do? Or is what they do make the most amount of money because of greed and all this stuff? And the people that play ball rise to the top and all these things. So I think that even you want to call it a cult or whatever, this is the other thing I was going to say. I think people have kind of a wrong idea exactly of what a cult is and what it can be. It's not just all about like a place where you go and you're drinking the Kool-Aid and there's like a David Koresh kind of guy or whatever. Well, he might have been innocent, so I don't want to, who knows, right? But I think what happens is, like you guys said, these things start with good ideas because obviously a lot of people are sick with what's going on in the world, right? And they want something better. And so they go along. And then just like you said, with the narcissistic behavior, Sharon, you said you could parallel that one-on-one relationship that people can break down with like a narcissist and everyone talks about that, but you can parallel that with a group of people, like I was saying, a collective consciousness, right? Like its own little culture. And that's, I guess, when it becomes a cult. And if you think about the scientific, whatever that means, usage of the word culture, a culture is also something that you can let something grow. It's like an environment for I don't
breeding
know.
grounds.
Yeah, breeding ground, right? To grow and to see what happens in like a empty kind of space. I guess that's the wrong way to something that's I'm losing it here. Something
Yeah,
that's like
we get
separate
it.
from the regular. Yeah, you get it. So I think that's important to say that too, because a lot of people want to point fingers and blame people and get really upset and throw hate at people who might be who they think is a cult leader. But at the end of the day, you got to take a look in the mirror and say, are you really a victim? Like, did anybody come to your house and throw you in a van? You know what I mean? Like, I would say just look at it as you had a fun ride. You learned something in life, So, yeah, that's all. Because again, if you just point fingers, it's back to that victim stuff, and we just fall back down, right?
Yeah. And one more point. Sorry to keep it.
Oh, this is great. Sorry.
But
Sorry,
I was just going to say, like you were saying at the beginning, sometimes these things happen kind of spontaneously. Like they weren't necessarily planned by the cult leader, the alleged cult leader, right? It's just it's an opportunistic person that is like, oh, I'm getting this. Oh, I'm getting this. Oh, let's just keep rolling with it. How much more can I get? And I mean, I can speak from experience from being in a cult when I was, growing up, the cult church that I went to. And once I like read up, this was only a few years ago, was it 1920? Like 4 or 5 years ago that I finally came to the realization that this was the cult that I grew up in. And the guy, I was looking at some articles and some stuff talking about the guy, and it was like, he was very opportunistic. Like if somebody said something and he had done something and it kind of like went together, he would make up a story that would bring those two things together and then like make himself a thing about it. Like, oh, I was lifted up into the clouds and I was the angel messenger, blah, blah, blah. So, it's opportunism involved.
Yeah, and
100%. Yeah.
really quick, the last thing I wanted to say too is I know I'm terrible, but you know, because I think people that might watch it's possible that people might watch this happens a lot for the first time or whatever. And we're not judging people. Like we all have our issues that we're working on and stuff. What we're doing is though we've learned some things and they're like making a lot of sense to us, so we're just sharing it. But the way we look at other people or people who might be caught up in stuff like this, it's like they're just another person with their own cross to bear. Like we all have our crosses to bear. We're just putting this out there in the hopes that somebody who resonates with it is like, oh yeah, this makes sense. This is what I went through or whatever. I had a relationship like this, and feel free, please, to comment below and share your experiences with us and let us know how this resonates with you. But yeah,
Without further ado.
without further ado.
Absolutely.
But wait, one more. I'm just kidding.
um, so just to touch on that last thing that Sharon said about opportunists basically starting cults. Yeah, there's 100% that aspect of it, but then on the flip side, the cult members as well, there is a reason why those opportunities are there in the first place, and that's what I really want to focus on today. Not just on an individual level, but then on a societal level as well. So I guess to start on the individual level, healthy, healed people don't join cults. We'll just start off with that, right? Cults prey on or take advantage of very damaged people. And I know that we have all, I'm sure, had our own encounters with cults on one level or another, but it's very apparent. And it's not so much apparent at the foundation of what will eventually become the cult, because as we said, it doesn't always start that way. Um, Cults tend to, as what Sharon said, start with the idea of the counterculture of creating something beautiful, and then they devolve into just absolute madness, with like legitimate sycophants and gaslighting and narcissistic abuse and raking people financially and empty empty promises of a made up hierarchy within the cult and made up titles within the cult and responsibilities that you'll be given, or maybe when cults happen in real life, there's often like a compound or an area where the cult will be centered, and if you're a good enough boy, then you can live there. You can be offered keys, to live on the land, and it's all feeding into this. I think it's all feeding into something much deeper. On the surface, it seems like the person's just taking advantage of people for their money, and it's like, yeah, 100%. These cults they wouldn't function if there was not a monetary element to it, because who in their right mind is going to invest that much of their time every day to operating something like this as a cult leader if they're not being compensated very heavily for it, right? You wouldn't be able to. You need to go to work. You need to make an income. But on a much deeper level, and this is where I don't think that most cult leaders even have an understanding of this. This is where we go into like that spiritual, unseen, unknown realm, I think, where things just kind of play out and we don't even know that they're happening. But these people are preying on the inner child of each individual cult member who's following the leader. So to dive into that, what would prime somebody to be able to be taken advantage of so easily, like cult members are. And as I always say, everything goes back to childhood trauma, unresolved childhood trauma, I should say. Um, so there are very deep wounds that a lot of people carry around, specifically with their parents or guardians or whoever raised them, right? Um, and a lot of those could be like abandonment wounds or lack of self-esteem or just a wound of not being loved enough or not being taught enough about life, not having those emotional needs met when you were a child. And when you become an adult, there's this weird thing happens where people know that there's something wrong about them, like off about them, something damaged, but they don't want to show it to the world, right? Because then that would give the perception that they're weak, um, and nobody wants to feel weak. So most people just hide this within themselves, and then they seek external solutions to internal problems. And one of those is finding yourself a proper cult with a cult leader, somebody who is very charismatic and who is very proud of himself or herself, and somebody who seems to have answers, right? So we seek that external source of healing when it's impossible. Like you'll never get that from somebody else, but that's what these people are seeking when they get involved in a cult. And again, I really want to differentiate between people who might be around during the communal starting foundational part of what will eventually become a cult. Those are not the people that I'm talking about. Those people might just really want a group of people to hang out with or talk with who are like-minded and share some of the same, morals or some of the same interests. But like when a cult really takes that nosedive down into like just being just degradation, right? Like pure toxic evil. And it's like anybody could look at it and say, this is disgusting. This is abhorrent behavior. Um, and there are people still clinging on and doubling down and tripling down and becoming more vile. And, there's more sycophant behavior. Those are the people that I'm talking about that have these deep wounds, that are seeking somebody else to heal their problems for them because they don't even want to admit that they have the problem. There's very weird psychology behind it. So I'll stop there because I don't want to do like a 30-minute run and let you guys weigh in.
Yeah, thank you very much for oversharing. No, I totally agree with what you're saying because, if somebody was associated with one of these groups, they might take it personally and say, are you talking, what are you saying? I have all these, but I think like what you said with the way it starts out and just the community aspect of certain things are really good, especially when things out in the mainstream culture are going totally bananas. And you're one of the only ones who sees it around you. So you're like, what the F, man? What is going on? Like what happened in 2020 through now. There's just been insanity, especially if you watch the news still, or if you're even adjacent to the news. I mean, the only way I'm adjacent is through memes, but if you even took a little bit of this seriously, you would be just so stressed out and looking for people who agreed with you. So that's what
I
happened.
want to,
I'm the
I
same.
want to, sorry, throw in real quick. That's what I was going to say about the societal cause of why cults are able to happen is literally what you just said. So Sharon said they're opportunists on one end, right? The cult leader, or like the top brass who's working behind the scenes to make sure that the cult is able to happen, right? Those are opportunists taking advantage of these people. These people are triggered. And like I know that word has like a bad rap, especially since like, the mid
Trigger warning, all that.
2010s, like everyone was talking about being triggered.
Yeah.
But it's a legitimate thing. So when the world goes crazy periodically, because it does. It wasn't just, the sniffles 3 years ago. It's a periodic, um, like unleashing of just chaos in the world. It feels like every few years there's something that happens that really does legitimately trigger people to feel unsettled, unsafe, even as adults, because it's not triggering something here and now. It's triggering something that could even be forgotten, like buried in your subconscious from 30, 40, 50 years ago. Something happened where circumstances were kind of the same as a child, and it doesn't even have to be the same variables, right? So during the last 3 years, we had a set of guidelines that we were supposed to be able, or that we were supposed to follow, even though they were absolutely insane and made no sense, right? So a lot of people, this is like it's not a rare phenomenon, but given the last 3 years of chaos, it makes sense why so many online cults have started in the last 3 years, because a lot of people were triggered into feeling deep childhood wounds via the events since 2020. Now, those childhood wounds are not necessarily related to medical issues. And that's what people need to understand about childhood trauma is I'm not saying that when somebody was a child, they had to put on a diaper on their face or something. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that authoritarian push for you to not only accept but be glad that you're able to follow behaviors that are insane and make no sense could be triggering something from your childhood. How many of us as very small children were given rules by parents that made no sense, right? Maybe you have a narcissistic parent and they're just telling you to do something just to be in control. A lot of people grew up in homes where control was a basis for a relationship rather than love. So when you grow into adulthood and you have that same thing happening, it could be very triggering. You have a government who's telling you we're doing this because we want to keep you safe and we love you, but your radar is going off and going, no, you're batshit crazy. This is insane. This doesn't make any sense. This is just pure authoritarian, tyrannical control that's happening right now. And then you go, wait, this feels familiar. Like I something registers inside of you, and then you go, I was terrified when I was a child because I had nowhere to go. These were the top authority figures. My parents were the top authority figures, and they're telling me that I have to do X, Y, and Z. And the same thing is happening now, right? Like, who are you going to run to as a child if your parents are traumatizing you? You have nobody to run to. They're the top. Who are you going to run to as an adult when your very own government is doing the same exact thing to you? Where do you run to? It's the same exact thing that's happening, just different variables, different circumstances 20, 30, 40 years later. So that triggering that happened over the last 3 years, I think really birthed a lot of these online cults because people were very terrified of what they were seeing around them, even if they didn't know why. I mean, look at the reaction that people had. They were terrified, right? This didn't happen with bird flu, with swine flu, with any of the other ones that they tried to do. And what was the only difference? They implemented a lot of things with this one that they did not in the other ones. And I think that really struck a chord with people on a subconscious level. And then in come the opportunists, the narcissistic opportunists who might not even understand why they're doing something. But when you are a sociopath like that, a narcissist like that, a psychopath like that, you observe human behavior and you learn patterns of how people react to things. So I'm not saying that these cult leaders have like a deep understanding of psychology or anything, but they understand people's behavior and how they will react, and that's why they're so good at what they do.
Absolutely.
And I think they could even do it unconsciously. And without even realize what they're doing, some people. And when we say things like narcissist and psychopath and all that, people that just display this behavior, they don't even have to be like a diagnosed narcissist or a narcissist or whatever, but somebody just exhibits this behavior, it's going to fall into that pattern. I think what happens is we don't realize as men and women, we have patterns of behavior that we can get stuck in. And the larger our reach and the more people in our circle, they're also going to be affected by us if we're like the top one at that. So these things will, I think, just manifest organically. It's really, really crazy. So again, because I think a lot of people throw around terms like narcissist that can trigger people, right? Because like, oh, well, that doesn't mean this and that and all that. But like I said, we're just talking about behavior, right? At the end of the day, we're not really. It's not as important the label, I guess.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a correlation between clinical narcissists and sociopaths and psychopaths and cult leaders. But yeah, I mean, you see a lot of that behavior exhibited within cult members because they're trying to emulate this person. And again, that's the childhood parent relationship. You try to emulate your parents,
Mm-hmm.
right? The
Oh,
same thing is happening because children were hurt by their parents and now they're looking for a new external authority figure. They're prescribing parenthood onto the cult leader. Be my daddy, be my mommy, heal those wounds that my real mommy and daddy gave me. Um, the cult leader, it's sad. It's sad. I'm not mocking people at all. It's very sad because they're hurting so bad inside, but they will not admit it even to themselves. But from an outside perspective, you're letting another man or another woman make decisions about your personal life, about your marriage, about how you raise your children, about your religion, about your finances, whatever it may be. This person doesn't even know your name. This person does not even know your name, but you are giving them parental status in your heart because you need a wound healed so bad. It's very sad. Yeah.
and I just thought of something funny too, interesting. But there are people who um will give that kind of the attention that a like you were saying, that this is my daddy figure, I need this to be healed, and I'm in the cult. But then I've seen also behavior of like, I'm so obsessed with this that I have to, like, quote, hate watch, or, um, I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. So even that still continues to give that narcissist cult leader attention. It's like it's not going to end. It's not going to help necessarily. Maybe it might serve to like wake other people up, but mostly I think if it's done in such hate, with such hatred, it's not helpful.
Yeah, 100%. And I would say that I would argue that it's the same wound.
Yep,
It's just
absolutely.
manifesting in a different way.
Yep.
There's 100%. There's cults where people watch because they're obsessed and then they hate watch. But at the end of the day, it's like both parties are spending the same amount of time watching or listening
Mm-hmm.
to the same cult leader. They're engaging in the same amount of discussion, the same amount of mental energy is going to thinking about this person. Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
weird. And I think
And
it's the same thing. It's like that could just be a manifestation of somebody's buried trauma towards their own mother or father for hurting them, and now they have a way to, ascribe parental status to somebody else and then get that anger and that venom out onto this person. But
mhm,
it's obviously not going to work. They're not your parent, you know.
yeah.
But people try weird things.
And it's not helpful in the end. I can see how it can be helpful in the beginning um to vent with people that maybe are close to you and get a support group and have people to talk to and heal. And eventually that it becomes a non-issue. You don't really talk about it anymore, or um, even if you do, you laugh about it. It doesn't hurt like it did when you first left and realized what a mess you were in.
Yeah. And when it doesn't hurt anymore is when you know that you've begun to heal.
Yes.
I won't make any claims for anybody and say like, you're healed now, but
Yeah,
at
right.
least at least the healing has begun because when you think about it, or if you hear somebody say something, and this is just across the board, this isn't just pertaining to cults, just in general, like when you can think about something or hear somebody talk about something and not have that emotional trigger reaction, you can think about it just objectively and just laugh about it and see all the beauty in it, even though it is chaotic and disgusting at times. That's when healing is beginning to happen.
Yeah, I think that's really important because I feel like if not, then you just took this person who you had on a pedestal and now you just put them in the pit, right? And now they're the cause of all your problems instead of the solution to all your problems. It's just like inverted, right? And that's why
Yeah, and
it still
it
flows.
honestly, it's like what a lot of kids do to their own parents if they grow up in dysfunctional, abusive homes, right? One day they want daddy to love them, and they love daddy so much because he did this for them, and then the next day maybe daddy has a temper tantrum and now we hate daddy. He was so mean today. It's just the same thing, flipping
Now I'm
back
gonna
and
go be a
forth.
stripper because my dad, right? It's like
Yeah.
into
Yep.
I
So
try to
yeah, I
watch
mean
a lot
that's
of Rick
the
and Morty.
like the foundation of what I wanted to talk about, and we can branch off and go any which way, is that childhood trauma primes people to join cults because there are unhealed, very deep, very traumatic wounds from childhood that a lot of people don't even know that they have. And I think until you really address those or even admit that you have them, right? Like you don't have to completely heal something before you can move on from a toxic relationship or a toxic situation. But you have to, I would say, at least address that you have something going on.
Acknowledge. It's the first step,
Yeah.
acknowledging it.
And I've found that, just reverting back and just allowing that. I really don't like this term when I say inner child. People say inner child because I feel like it's almost there's like an element of detachment to it where it's almost like you're talking about something or somebody else. Like it's not you, it's my inner child. Like no, it's just who you are. It's who you were when you were a child. You're still that person. We've talked about this. You're still that person. You just now have this duffel bag full of coping mechanisms and defense mechanisms. But once you stop giving so much energy and attention to keeping all of those defenses at the ready, which I think is funny because you pulled that 10 of wands and it talked about juggling all these different things. That's a perfect analogy for what people um, do in their own lives to stop being hurt more, right? They have all these defense mechanisms, but once you just let those go and just let yourself be who you really are, then you can look at these online cults if you're part of one and just be like, this is not anything that I would have been involved in when I was, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. Why am I part of it now? I would never subject my own child to this filth. So why am I subjecting myself to it now? Um, you really need to remember who you are and allow yourself to partake in those things. I mean, a lot of these cults, it's like, and this is like not a new phenomenon either. This goes way back, like you can talk to people who were in cults 40, 50 years ago and they say the same thing. It's like these cult leaders literally try to get you to stop engaging with the outside world in any way. They paint this picture of everything is evil. You should be terrified. They're coming for you. It's only a matter of a time. They're coming for you. They're going to take your organs. They're going to take your home. They're going to do all
The
this
end of the
stuff.
world is coming.
The end of the world is coming. Um, First off, it doesn't make sense. I think it's silly. If the end of the world is coming, why are you starting a cult? Would you not? Wouldn't you want to spend time with your family or go travel and see the world, or like, you know, help people get your karma up or something? It's like the global warming people who are like, 2012, everything's gonna end. The oceans are gonna rise 1,000 feet, but then they're buying beachfront property. It's the same exact thing. Um, they're creating this false image of the world, which works. That's a sad thing, is it works because they're not creating it for. And again, I don't think that this is on purpose. I think this is very, very subconscious, like on a spiritual level. They're not creating this image for men and women, for strong men and women. They're creating this fear for that inner child. They're scaring the inner child, um, in the same way that a lot of parents scare children, right? And this is why I think parenting needs to be a very conscious thing, and it's not. A lot of people are damaged because the parent is overwhelmed and they're stressed out and they yell something at their kid. You don't realize that when you're parenting, you're teaching 100% of the time. You don't have to sit a kid down with a pen and paper and say, "No, it's time to do your ABCs." Every reaction, every word, everything that they take in, they're learning. So if you yell at your kid and say, "Don't you run out in that parking lot, there's cars out there, one of them will hit you and kill you," you have just instilled fear in your child of something that doesn't need to be scary, right? You could much more calmly explain to them why you don't run out into a parking lot. But most parents don't do that. And the same thing is happening with the cult leaders. I think they're saying, "Oh, if you go out and you put a mask on, have fun in your FEMA camp." That's not the reality of the situation. It's not the reality of the situation whatsoever. But they're painting this terrible world so that people don't even engage in it. And lo and behold, somebody has an answer. Somebody has a plan. Somebody's going to have some property. They'll definitely let you in when the whole world comes crashing down. You're definitely going to be let in there. They don't know your name. They don't know what you look like. They don't know who your family is. They don't know if you're a good person or not, but they're definitely going to let you in because they told you that they would. Um, it's opportunism based on trauma. And that's why I think that cults are one of the most disgusting things. Anything that plays on trauma and like takes advantage of hurt people is very disgusting to me. People that play on fear and trauma and pain and stuff instead of trying to help people, it's abhorrent behavior to me.
Indeed.
Yeah, and you see that with a lot of these different channels that are out there with the fear. They just play on the fear. And even if they think they're not playing on the fear, they're playing on the fear.
Yeah, or if they claim that they're not,
Yeah.
but they really are. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of victimy. I notice a lot of victimy. I can see the victimhood in a mile away these days when people say anything anymore. I'm just like, sounds very victimy.
Yep.
So you're telling me you're a victim?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's the other thing, though, I want to say really quickly. It's also hard when, for me anyway, when I get in this position, because now I automatically start to judge everybody who I'm seeing as acting like a victim. And now that's something I have to work on. So, see, everybody, we're not claiming to be perfect over here. We all have our stuff that we work on. We just worked through
Right.
some stuff and we thought we'd share some ideas, right? Like, but yeah, I think that's the funny thing about the spiritual
Journey.
journey, yeah, is that's part of it. You learn these truths, right? And then you're like, oh yeah, now I'm better than everyone else. So it's like your consciousness goes up and then it goes back down. Then you're like, oh shit. And then it goes back up and then it goes back down. It's, I mean, I guess it's not like,
Spiritual egos.
yeah, spiritual ego comes in. Yeah, that's why I'm wearing the hat today, because I just want everyone to know what a silly wizard I am.
Yes. Brandolph the Gray.
Randolph the Gray, that's right.
Indeed.
Yeah, it's crazy. Whole thing is crazy. I think it all is just childhood trauma as always, and it's a sad thing to me is that I'm not going to say that it's easy to heal from these deep wounds, but the steps that are necessary for one to take to even begin the healing are so much easier than people really think. Um, and yeah, as we talked about a couple minutes ago, the first one is just acknowledging, right? You wake up every day, you have this gnawing, kind of nagging, just sadness inside of you or pain, something you can't explain. You just need to acknowledge that straight out of the gate. Acknowledge that you're not feeling like you want to or like you remember feeling. That's one of the things that's helped. That's one of the things that has helped me most in life is comparing how I feel at any given point to how I feel, like how I remember feeling when I was a child, and just being like, well, I'm not there today, so obviously I need to adjust something because that's fully attainable at all points during life. It's not like you can only be that happy when you're a child. Yes, things were not as stressful in ways, but then they were more stressful in other ways. Like you didn't have
Mhm.
money, but you also couldn't really communicate with people. You couldn't make rational decisions because your brain wasn't even developed yet. Like you had a whole different set of circumstances as a child, but you still were capable of joy for the most, like the smallest things would bring you so much joy. So I like to compare how I'm feeling or my reactions to things with how I remember my childhood. That's a good place to start, I would say. Anyways, healing is to think about your childhood a lot. Like really think about it. And then from there, like do things that you enjoyed doing from your childhood without the fear of societal or cult judgment. Just do them. Like
Right.
if you enjoy reading, then read. If you enjoy playing video games, play video games. I don't demonize things uh, like that, which is something that you'll find in cults all the time, right? Oh, you play a
Mhm.
video game, you're worthless, you're whatever, expletive, derogatory, name calling, gaslighting, narcissistic, abuse intended name. Like, no. If you like playing video games, play video games. Maybe somebody played video games with their parent when they were young and then they lost their parent. And then playing a video game kind of lets them, nostalgically remember those times with their parent. Like, how's that a bad thing? It's just
Yeah.
read books.
In
If you enjoy movies, enjoy movies. There's nothing wrong with
Mhm.
movies. There's nothing wrong with books. There's nothing wrong with video games. For every argument that these cult leaders have against something, there are a million arguments for something. Like if you play video games, the best surgeons in the world were either video game players when they were children or are still active video game players. Their hand-eye coordination
dexterity,
is,
yeah.
yeah, the dexterity, like it is unparalleled. So you can talk shit about video game players until you need a heart transplant, and then you're gonna want somebody who plays video games and they're doing it. You can talk shit about people that watch movies until you want movie recommendations, and then it's just never ending. It's like just stop listening to these people and just be who you are. This life was given to you to experience, not to just funnel away all of your money and your time and your energy um, to somebody else who doesn't care about you. Like, find out who you are.
Yeah. The cult I grew up in there were just even more basic things, just very simple, basic things that I couldn't do as a little girl. If I wanted to go play sports in like grade school, I really couldn't because I wasn't allowed to wear pants or shorts. I had to wear a skirt or a dress that covered my knees or below. And so I looked like a little prairie girl, little house on the prairie. And just a lot of other restrictions. My hair could never be cut, so it was very long. So it for me, like it would get in my way. And over time I felt like I was getting headaches too. And I felt like it was because of that. Um, just simple things that as a kid growing up, I didn't think it made any sense that I couldn't wear pants. It was so simple, you know, that I couldn't cut my hair. That it was just a really simple thing. Why couldn't I be able to cut my hair and be comfortable? It took me a long time. And sometimes I still struggle with the hair thing, like, because I prefer having shorter hair. And like the haircut that I really liked the most for myself was like a like a short bob, like even shorter than it is now. And but I struggle mentally with that because that was prohibited. And we're talking how many freaking years ago was that, And it's still for me like a thing that I'm like, but I should look like more girly with longer hair and, you know, and nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with girls that have long hair. I see girls with long hair all the time. I used to have really long hair too. And I thought when it was like probably around the length of my, mid to low back, it was nice hair. I had great hair, but, and I see other people and I'm like, oh, they have beautiful, gorgeous hair. But I just, for some reason, still have this thing and I just don't allow myself to let it grow out. Because in my mind, even as a kid, I always imagined myself with short hair. Like for me, that's what's comfortable. That's what works for me. And kind of same thing with the dresses and the skirts. Like I I don't hardly ever wear dresses or skirts. I mostly wear jeans or shorts because that's what I always thought was comfortable. So it's just, I mean, cults can do like so much damage to just your mind and how you see something. Like they'll turn something into like an atrocious sin, which is just very simple and basic, like earrings too. Like I didn't pierce my ears until I was, yeah, I mean, it was probably years ago, 10 years ago, maybe. And that, because I wasn't allowed to do that. Just weird. So, like, when you're in it and you question things and you're like, this is weird. Why is this not allowed? I mean, use your logic too. That's okay. And think about it. Like, is it a bad thing? What's going to happen if you do? Are you
Well,
going to be struck by lightning?
yeah, and also understand that 100% of the time when a cult leader is telling you to not do something, they are doing it. It's every single time, right? You'll have cult leaders who say you can't drink alcohol, but quietly behind the scenes they're still alcoholics, or
Mm-hmm.
you can't take you know you can't take a Tylenol if you have a headache or whatever, right? I don't personally take any
I don't either.
pharmaceutical medication, but I don't bash people
Who need it?
who yeah,
Right.
who need it.
Yeah.
Um, because that, I mean, that's a whole nother talk in itself, right? I'm not going to judge people for where they are on their
Right.
health journey or whatever. But if
Exactly.
somebody has children and they're working full time and they have a splitting headache and they need to take an aspirin or a Tylenol or something, you have a cult leader in your ear telling you not to do that while they're like snorting gas station caffeine pills and Adderall. And it's like, why are you taking this person's advice? People will,
Mm-hmm.
you just talked about, your hair and stuff. There are cult leaders who talk about how you can groom your own body, like body hair. Like the
Right.
the depth of the insanity of cults
Yes.
is
Absolutely.
is is insane, but you have to understand that these people are doing it. And
Right.
that's one of the weirdest things about cults is one day something will be unacceptable, untolerated. If you even speak on it, you're banned
Mm-hmm.
from the cult. We'll never say your name again. but then 2 days later, the
It's
cult
okay.
leader can decide that it's okay. And then everybody's just, oh, yeah, it's always been okay. This is fantastic. This is
Right.
great. This is the best thing ever. And it's like, what are you doing? Like, do you
In
ever just stop and just want to go do your own thing for a day and not have to worry about that? That is a lot of stress.
Yeah,
That's a lot of stress to constantly have to keep up on what is okay or not okay within your cult. Like, what happens if you go
totally.
take a vacation for 2 weeks and you come back? I mean, God,
Things
the
are upside
pressure,
down.
yeah, the like you'd have to reassimilate. That process would be insane. It's just just be who you are.
Yeah, in the cult I grew up in, it's bizarre because it's still going even though the cult leader is dead. I
Whoa,
mean, because some of them believe that he's going to rise again, like Jesus,
sure,
for real. Um, and like there's also this like you were talking about, like it could change from day to day of what they're going to say. Well, this particular one would change based on his location. So if like he was preaching in one town, well then he would go to another town, and whatever church that was, he would talk about whatever was amenable to them. So like if Christmas was okay or whatever, he would work that angle. So there's a lot of different churches around the world who have so many different, like, so many differing views on just could it be one thing. Like there were churches that were like, oh, Christmas is okay, Christmas is fine, it's great, whatever, you can have a tree, you can do all of that kind of shit. And then others were like, God forbid you even like celebrate it at all.
yeah,
It varies. And it's just bizarre because the cult leader will, again, opportunist, whatever that particular audience was okay with, they would, go with that. And that's how they would maneuver.
yeah, totally. It's just the hypocrisy and the double standards are they're so comically apparent, but when you have those cult goggles on, it's like all logic goes out the window, you know. It's very sad. It's like you'll see cult leaders just, I mean, do anything and everything.
Oh, yeah.
At this point, they have an opinion on everything.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
go, like, that would be exhausting in itself, like
Absolutely.
I don't want to be involved in anything like that.
Right. Well,
That
and okay, so we've talked about this before, but some people, again, it's probably a trauma from childhood, but they need someone to tell them what's okay and what's not okay.
yeah,
Right. And so, because they need that parent figure. And so they'll be like, well, the church, they've been around for XYZ and they know, and the church leaders and the priests and the XYZs, bishops and all, they know. And it's like, uh, those things were made up. Like those were just rules that they made up for people. Like you're going to listen to that? No offense.
yeah, none of that is in the Bible. Like you can pick up a Bible and read it. A lot of these things are given to you by men,
Mm-hmm.
and men 1,000 years ago when times were way different,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very strange. Like you know, you
And
can't
even
drink
if it
alcohol,
is,
but you're still a drunk. You can't watch movies because movies are satanic, right? You can't watch movies or TV, but also, do you have any good movies or TV recommendations?
yeah, exactly.
And people,
Yeah.
I just think about how many people like sold all of the TVs in their home who enjoyed watching movies or TV prior, and then find out that their cult leader is actively watching TV. And it's just like, at what point do you
Only,
just stop and
only
go,
that,
what?
yeah, only the cult
Yeah,
leader's
only
allowed to
they're
watch it.
allowed to. Yeah,
So they can tell you what it says.
yeah. I've heard of cults where people like degrade the idea of dinosaurs and say that you're a terrible parent if you allow your children to have a book with dinosaurs in it because it's part of a secret agenda, and but then are completely fine with their children enjoying dragons.
Mm. Yeah, it's like other things like fairies and those are okay, but God forbid dinosaurs and
Yeah, you can't
dragons
have
and
dinosaurs, but you can for sure have dragons and any other made up mythological creature. Uh, but who knows? Maybe next week you can have
fairies and mermaids.
dinosaurs. You never know. It's
True.
also silly, and it's like when you look at it from the outside and you look at these people who genuinely believe that they are part of something, and you're like, you're part of wasting your life and making somebody else rich. That's what you're part of. You know, that's a sad truth of it. Whatever these cults start out as, it's never what they end as. Like every single intentional community has failed. Every single intentional community has failed in the long run. Some of them go much longer than others, and that could simply be based on the variables. Maybe the
Hmm.
outside societal issue that made that cult possible lasts longer during that time than a different time, but they all fail. And you can have these beautiful relationships with people on a smaller scale too. Like that's one thing that I've really been focusing on recently is like remembering that you can talk to your neighbors. You can talk to people when you go through a grocery store checkout line. You don't have to find people who
Agree with everything you
agree
agree
with,
with.
yeah, every single opinion in
Hmm.
order to speak to somebody. Just talk
Hmm.
to the person in the grocery checkout line. Like that person's been standing there for 6 hours.
That's what Jesus would have done.
Yeah, they'd probably love to have a, 2 minute conversation about the weather. They don't give a shit. People just want human connection again. And like, what more detached of a life is there than never speaking to anybody in person and only speaking to people online who somebody else said that you could speak to, but maybe not today because that person's being showing behavior that I don't like. But then the next day you can talk to that person. It's like, come on, people, you're not 3 years old. You're grown ass men and women. Make your own decisions. Talk to who you want to talk to. Don't let somebody rule your life like that. And in doing so, you will begin to heal that trauma inside of you. All of those wounds that led you down that path to eventually get into the cult will begin to heal, and then you can get out. And I'm like, this is the weird part. Like, I'm so deep and like meta about this stuff that I'm not even mad at the cult. I'm not mad at the idea of the cult because the cult allows a lot of people to heal. A lot of
Absolutely.
people don't know that they have issues until they get
Mhm.
into the cult, and then they're given that
Absolutely.
perspective, and then they go, holy shit, this is
Huge.
everything that I always thought that I wanted, was this intentional community of like-minded individuals. And now that I'm in it, I'm repulsed by it, and this is not who I am.
Absolutely. It's huge.
Yeah, it's
Um,
like any other echo chamber, sorry there, Sharon, that there's really no growth, right? And like you were saying, it becomes after a while, you have this fear that you're going to do something that's wrong and you're going to be ostracized. And if people were really there for you, then they would be there for you, unless you were like, committing crimes or something or doing something really abhorrent. But if you were just having a drink or watching a movie or whatever it is, something, or if you cut your hair or whatever, and people are going to like shun you and freak out, that's a whole new level.
And that's why people oftentimes stay in cults, is because they don't want to, maybe they were abandoned by their father or their mother in childhood, and now they've gotten themselves in so deep and they don't even understand that they've created this weird parental child relationship with this random person online. they don't want to feel that pain again of feeling like they've been abandoned again by somebody that they put up on a pedestal. And it's like there's nothing else that you could possibly do at that point. Like you really do just have to go, that was silly of me to do, and then chop that pedestal down and run. Um, there's no other outcome. There's no other way to make that situation work. You just have to admit what you did. And ironically, admitting what you did will help you heal, and then it won't hurt to run from that abusive, toxic person. It all
Yes,
goes back to healing, like healing trauma, admitting that you were hurt. There's nothing wrong with being hurt. Life is pain.
absolutely.
Life is always pain. Like you're constantly gonna get hurt. If it's not, somebody in your life, it could be the fucking weather. You could get struck by lightning. That hurts. You could get attacked by an animal. That hurts. You could slip and fall down the side of a mountain. That hurts. Like there is pain everywhere in this life, but I think what makes us human is admitting that pain and then working together to not let it allow us to become, so jaded in life, so apathetic towards people.
Yeah, I like you were just talking about pain and being hurt, and I was just thinking I'll just speak out loud what I was coming to my mind is that people are afraid to show weakness, right? So that's why they're afraid to say that they were hurt or they're in pain or they fell, quote. Um, but the narcissist or the, narcissist cult leader is, to show weakness and pain like that is to be vulnerable, is to be, quote, human. And they have set themselves up as godlike. So they're very unlikely to show that humanity, that weakness, that vulnerability. So you won't see that from them. It has to come from you to acknowledge that you were hurt, that you're in pain, that you're vulnerable, you know? And
Yeah.
speaking of like vulnerability, it's especially difficult sometimes in cults for women because the men seem to take very strong views, um, especially from the cult leader, because mostly it's men. Um, and the men in these cults, the cult leaders, will tell men how to treat their wives. They'll tell them how to be in bed and, all these things that they have no business telling other men what to do
Yeah.
because each relationship is different. Each marriage is different. They have no business telling you what to do. And yet they're telling people all these things. And these women become, they end up in abusive situations. And it's very much a wake up call. I read about it for the cult that I grew up in. I mean, so I can imagine it's just like this for every cult. Women being treated atrociously. When I read it, I was so angry. I was so upset. And I was just upset at the situation, right? How could that happen? But it also made me upset with the cult and the cult leader, so much so that was my moment of like, wake up, like that is a cult. And, that served its purpose. But, yeah, I was just trying to bring up the point that women suffer a lot in some of these cults because they are more vulnerable in many ways when, a man tries to, control them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that also is childhood trauma. I mean, everything
Hmm.
is childhood trauma, and
Hmm.
it's nothing new here to any of us, but it's like that cliche saying of daddy issues, right? Like that's it's thrown around, and it's I think it's people try to minimize the severity of it, but it's very true. Like, little girls into young women should have a strong, moral, loving father in their life. And when they don't, then they again seek it externally. This is
Hmm.
the recurring theme, is seeking something externally that you did not have in your childhood. So then they go, this cult member, maybe I'll get involved with this cult because this guy who I like is into it and I want to make him happy. And it's almost, the same thing with the cult members who join because they need that parental relationship again with the cult leader. It's almost like people are trying to recreate their childhoods in adulthood, but in a safer way with people that they have chosen. Like none of us get the opportunity to choose the families that we're born into or the parents that we have. We're just given what we're given, and those circumstances that we grow up within, we don't really have a lot of control over. So then I think that that's really one of the driving things that makes cults possible is people then grow up and they get money and they get a home, then maybe they get a wife, they get kids or whatever, and they go, okay, now that everything else in my life is settled and I feel some level of comfort financially or whatever, maybe I can go back and try to heal those wounds now subconsciously. I'm not saying that anybody does this from a place of like conscious thought or decision, but they go, maybe I can kind of try to recreate my family now, but I will choose a daddy who believes in everything that I believe in, right? And
Hmm.
then that's it's just not going to work. I mean, I understand the mechanism behind it because it's like maybe I can try to feel love from a father figure who I agree with and agrees with me on everything and tells me that I'm a good boy every day because I did X, Y, and Z, or I gave him a certain amount of money. But it's like that's literally just going to make that wound worse that
Hmm.
you have with your own parents. Like you have to address the actual problem. None of what you're doing is actually going to heal the wound. Being involved in a cult could be a catalyst for sparking that understanding that you need to address those things, but I'm definitely not telling anybody to run out and try to find a cult to heal their childhood trauma because there are much easier paths to doing that.
Yeah, 100%. I'm glad you said that because it's something I wanted to bring up is another mode of healing. And it really just has to do with being in contact with the present moment. As cheesy, as cliche as that sounds, just like you said with the daddy issues thing, right? It gets thrown around in a different way, though, the present moment. But there really is a lot there. Or in my journey, I found that there's a lot there because in the present moment, like right now, for example, or when we end this recording, I could be here and I could have anxiety and fear about things that I have to do and about the future. But in the moment, I'll just be here. There's nothing attacking me now. And it's something that I learned and helped me a lot. It was one of the guided meditations that I was doing when I was getting into meditation. And the guy was saying, he's like, is there anything attacking you right now? Let's think about how safe you are. Think about the locks on your door. And they were a little new agey, so they weren't saying like, think about your safe in the back that might contain firearms, allegedly. But it's just thinking about all
Think
the,
about how you can protect yourself.
yeah, think about how you are protected, right? And
Hmm.
even society, and he was saying like the laws and how people normally are, and it really isn't as dangerous as you think. And just this whole exercise that you go through, and you ponder that in the present moment, and it really helped me a lot because I did have all this fear of the future. I was worried about things that were going to happen, just anxiety. And then after I listened to that meditation a few times, it really started to stick with me. And I'm like, yeah, what the hell am I like? Everything right now in the perfect moment is all right. Now, I'm not saying you just don't make any plans for the future or, you don't like, you're only like living in the present moment. That might not be for everybody, right? Maybe if you're like a comedic performer or whatever, you could just do whatever you want, or a rock star. But yeah, you have to make plans and look ahead to the future and stuff, but it doesn't mean you have to get lost there, right? Same thing with the past. You don't have to get lost in the things that you've done, and the things that have happened to you. I say you could just, the best use of the past really is to just learn and use it as an example moving forward. In the future, the best use for that is to just make a good plan, but be open, right? Be open to whatever happens. It's just like we've been talking about in our Tao series on the Over Sharon Show podcast. We're doing a whole series on the Tao Te Ching. Check it out. Even have its own playlists on YouTube. But they talk about this balance. And it really, I'm beginning to learn that the Tao is really all just about balance. There's people that are quote unquote like Taoist monks, and they could still go out and drink and do all these things and have a good time. But it's more about a balance, right? It's like, are you always going out and having a drink every night, or is it like a once in a while thing to let out some steam or whatever? And even if you are always going out and having a drink, it's about where you are right now, right? And moving forward and what's going to actually fulfill you, because people think that all these things, and cults are the same way. They think they're going to be fulfilled. They have this hole inside them, something that's missing. They're always chasing it, right? And that's why people go after money and they want to be rich. Let me tell you, I know plenty of rich people, and they're no happier than me. They actually like to hang out with me because sometimes I bring a lot of joy to their life because I'm funny or whatever, and I just have a good attitude. But no matter how much seeking in the external, it really comes down to just self-love and getting to know yourself and accepting who you are. All your crazy cravings and all these terrible things that they are, you just have to start there where you are and accept it and love it. And then I feel like that's when true healing can actually occur. Because if not, it manifests in different ways. It's just like any of those funny cartoons or movies where they're like near a dam and it springs a leak, or like Austin Powers, right? So and then he puts a little gum in one leak and then it pops out somewhere else. I feel like that's how it works with this stuff. When you try to push it down and repress it, it just comes out in other areas.
And also understanding too that you are not your body. And a lot of the decisions that you make and a lot of the fears that you have are based on biochemical reactions within your body that are triggered from past traumas. So like, yeah, I mean,
And even past traumas that are passed down in your family line.
Yeah.
People don't
yeah, like
epigenetically.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
However,
So like if you're having a reaction to something or you have a fear of something, really sit there and think about it for a minute and just go like, am I actually like consciously scared of this thing, or is this a reaction that's taking place inside of me, and my mind has now been hijacked by my body, because that happens 90% of the time, right? So like, are you really scared that the world is falling apart, or that the world is going to end, or that they're going to set up FEMA camps and everything because you didn't want to put something over your mouth during flu season? Is that what you're really scared of? Or is something very deep being triggered inside of you? And now you're attributing your fear to this thing in society and then running to join a cult,
yeah,
thinking that you'll be saved. It's like, that's not how it works. You really have to, one of the best things that I ever did after my like severe car accident is I got to a point where I was extremely anxious. Like I had crippling anxiety about everything. None of it made sense. It was all illogical. I was completely under the control of my dysregulated nervous system. Right. I was riding that roller coaster every day. And I had to start doing exposure therapy. So like when you are terrified of something and it's illogical, it's irrational, it makes no sense, the only way to really get over it is to do it.
Expose yourself to it.
Yeah, you got to retrain your brain, right? Because your brain now has this trigger of saying maybe every time I go to this place, you have to be nervous because something bad happened in this place. You have to go to that place repeatedly and retrain your brain and get rid of those triggers, because they're literal triggers in your brain. They are neural pathways that your brain creates. So when you go to that place again, you will have that reaction and your body will tell you to run. This happens in the animal kingdom all the time. This happens with every living thing, right? If a gazelle escapes a lion, the gazelle sits there and shakes for 10 or 15 minutes afterwards. And what they're doing is they're not only getting rid of the adrenaline in their body, they're literally burning it off through muscle contraction. But during that 15 minutes, they've done brain scans on animals and found that they're creating neural pathways in their brain at like 1,000 times faster than they usually do.
Mm.
So the animal is replaying everything that just happened during that chase with the predator, so that next time they get chased, if they run through that same exact place, they know last time I almost tripped over this stick right here. So the brain creates a little memory inside the head so that next time you're going to jump a little bit faster so you don't trip. The human brain does that as well. So you have to do exposure therapy and really, really, even if things are scary, you still have to do them. I mean, I did it the other day. I have horrible balance issues. I have like inner ear issues. I have Meniere's disease. And then just with my back, and I have sciatica in my left leg. So my left leg is like half numb. So all of these things together, I have really bad balance issues. One of the things that really sets it off is when I ride in an elevator, because, and this is fairly common if you have balance issues, you can't see any movement taking place, but your body perceives that you're moving.
Mm-hmm.
And if you already have a compromised, what's the word? Is it vestibular system in your ear? Then it can just set it off. And all of a sudden you feel like you're spinning and rocking on a boat.
Mm.
So for 10 years now, I don't take elevators. I just take stairs everywhere. And I always have told myself, well, it's good for you. It's better to take stairs, right? You're getting, if something's on the fifth floor, you just climbed 5 flights of stairs, right? That's a little tiny 2-minute workout during the day. You got a little bit of exercise. But I had an ENT appointment the other day and I took the elevator. I was by myself. It's like I've had a legitimate fear of taking elevators because of what it does to me. I can't even hardly walk afterwards. But then I realized like that's a trigger because it happened a long time ago. And I took an elevator the other day, got off, and I just walked to my appointment. I was pretty dizzy for about a minute afterwards, but it didn't kill me. Like these are you gotta really understand that a lot of the fears that you have about life are they're not really who you are. And they can lead you to some very, that was such a long explanation, but they can lead you to some very dark life choices that you will regret later, like joining cults.
Yeah.
I feel like it all boils down to a fear of death too. When you boil all these fears down,
Yes.
really, and I think that that's a good place to start too. Like, and the other thing I was going to say really before I get into that was going to be sometimes what I would do when I talk to people that have fears or irrational fears. I'm like, well, think about what's the worst that's going to happen, right? Go down this road. That might not be a good example with the whole FEMA camp thing, but say it's just like a fear of public speaking or a fear of this, or like you getting on the elevator. What's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to pass out in the elevator or you're going to fall over and somebody might laugh at you or whatever, right? So I tell people that too. They have this anxiety and they're like, oh, I'm worried about this. And it's the same way that I got through it. It was the same thing with my anxiety. I'm like, well, what's the worst that's going to happen? And most times I boiled it down to, oh, I can die, right? And that's when I think I made a lot of progress was when I got over my fear of death. And again, I always say it's not like I want to die or I'm like looking forward to it or anything. It's just that I am not really fearing it because I feel like everything that ends has a new beginning. It feels like that's the way this whole realm works. So no matter what happens after I die or pass away, I think it's going to be not what we're taught. It's just going to be like a normal thing. And the best way I always describe it to people, it's like waking up from a dream, right? We're going to wake up and be like, oh, okay, all right. That's what it was all about. Or like when you're playing a video game and you die, you're like, ah, shit, now we got to do this over again or whatever it is. So, yeah.
Yeah, totally. A lot of fears are irrational. That one in particular, that's one that I've pondered for like 20 years. It's like, why are even me, dude, I'm scared of death 100% because I don't know what's on the other end. But then it's like, is it a fear of death or is it a fear of the unknown?
Mm-hmm.
Is it a fear of lack of control? Like, there's so many elements to that when you really dive into it. And then you apply those to cult members, and it's like, is there a fear of lack of control with them? Like sometimes it's weird, man. There's so many, sometimes you feel so out of control or unable to control your own life that, like Sharon said, you want to give somebody else that control over you. Um, don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do that. That's dangerous. Um,
I mean, if you're going to
when
do
you
it, do it, but just know the consequences.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely can. I would strongly advise you not do that because the only people that will ever consciously take that control are people who will hurt you and prey on you,
Manipulate you in
manipulate,
a negative way.
yeah,
Yeah.
extort you, whatever it
Mm-hmm.
is. They'll use you. Like
Mm-hmm.
people who are balanced and healed and compassionate and moral, people who understand that you are also a human being, they don't want that control. Normal people
Exactly.
don't want control over other people.
Mm-hmm.
Just normal people, one more time, normal people do not want control over other people. So if you ever find yourself in a situation, be it a online cult or a relationship or a friend group or whatever it may be, and they're trying to control you, um, that's a big red flag right there.
Yeah, it
Yep.
happens
Yep.
on the
Yep.
spiritual level too. If you evacuate your cockpit, as it's been put before, if you don't want to face certain things and you just give that duty to something else might come in and do it. And it's kind of like I think what demon possession is all about. And obviously there's more severe cases than others, It doesn't mean you have to be like with your head spinning around and like speaking Aramaic and all this stuff. I think it could just be behaviors that we unconsciously do. Stuff that would be considered, I guess, escapism. Could be like
Mm-hmm.
drug use. I mean, it could even be, it's things that people look at as healthy behaviors. But if you, again, going back to the Bible,
Attachment.
yeah, if you have an attachment to it, or if you're so strong in it, you just can't let it go. Maybe that's
Mm-hmm.
what's hindering you.
Yeah. And just, we're probably closing up the topic, but I just wanted to say before we do that again, we're not, you know, judging the people who are involved in these sorts of things. I mean, clearly, as Nick was saying earlier, we go through these things for a reason. We entered into these cults either because we were born into them or because later we somehow managed to end up in one, or we joined one because we thought it was going to be cool and the people were like us or whatever. So we don't judge. We're not saying this to be judgmental or to say we're better than anybody. We actually, I feel compassion for anyone who's in situations like that. But I also understand and comprehend that no one can save anybody and people are in the situation they need to be in. And if they're in it and they're gung ho and they're all in, that's the experience they need for whatever reason, whether it is to grow or because they just need to be that person to another person in their life. And that's what they're supposed to do this lifetime, then that's what it is. And same goes for any cult leaders. That's the role they're playing. That's the role that they decided to play this lifetime. So, um, you know, I wouldn't necessarily be friends with them, but you know, peace be unto them and let them figure their stuff out.
Um,
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Sharon, because I'm known as the capybara around these parts, and I'll basically be friends with anybody, and I'm not saying
Or
like,
talk to anybody. It's like
yeah,
we're not necessary. I'm like, if we have people on our show, it's not because we're like best friends with them or anything. You know, we talk to people, we allow people to share their stories, and you know, we interact with people. Didn't Jesus also interact with
yeah,
sinners and quote tax collectors? And they were just like, Jesus, why are you hanging out with them? It's like, well, he's like, you know, it's sick people that need a physician. Hello. It's not the people who are well.
yeah, and that goes
yeah,
back to the whole echo chamber thing, right? It's like you want to hang out with people that aren't like you, and that's what I wanted to say to add to what you were saying, Sharon. Is I don't judge people either. I mean, I'll hang out with people that are in a cult if they want to go hang out. And you know, it's not like I look at them as they're a cult member or whatever. They're just a person with their own thing. I mean, I hang out with people who think that space is real all the time. You know what I mean? So it's
That's another
me, it's
cult.
easier, you know, like that cult. It's like, all right, like I see people at NASA shirts everywhere, and I'm just like, good for you, man. You know, so
um, in all serious though, like what Sharon just said, that's another cult. That's a fact. Like there are cults that you don't even think are cults. Um, I think that a lot of things could be labeled as a cult, but people just
I
don't
concur.
label them like that. So
like people who own
it's a funny
iPhones.
joke, but it's very real. Yeah, like the iPhone Android thing for real.
Yeah,
It's
man.
like
People get so. I used to be on the iPhone side. Man, I was a warrior for iPhones, and then now I have a
then you
Galaxy.
made the right decision.
Yeah, and then
Um,
people with iPhones will be like, "Oh, you don't," and I'm like, "No, I've already been there. Don't worry. I just,
yeah, it was a
I'm the
phase.
same with Android. I'm like, oh, I tried. I really did. Couldn't do it. Sorry, buddy.
And who's winning though, right? It's iPhone and Samsung, right?
Doesn't matter,
Apple and
right?
Samsung, right? We're basically spokesperson for free for Apple or for
Yep.
Samsung, right?
I
Detriment to
do.
our own relationship, but yeah, go ahead.
If you guys have a couple more minutes, I do want to make one more point real quick.
Yeah.
Um, just to wrap this all up. Um, what Brandon said is 100% accurate. We're not like trying to degrade or dehumanize or devalue anybody who has been in a cult or is currently in a cult. Um, everybody is a human being. Everybody carries their trauma, and everybody makes very stupid decisions in this life, all of us included. I will say that a very interesting thought experiment that I did recently, because I come from a predominantly Christian background, and one of the questions that is often asked is, if God is good and loving, why would he allow this to happen? And we had Sharon and I kind of touched on this in a conversation days ago, but I want to reiterate it here. I think it's a perspective question. Um, when you look back on the events of the last 3 years that widely swept our entire world, we go, how would God allow that to happen? Because it was so evil, and it was so tyrannical. It was unknown evil, right? You had grandparents dying, unable to see their family. You had people in hospitals having babies, and husbands could not be there at the time. Just, I mean, that is ripping away so much good in this world. How would God allow that to happen? And I would pose the question: is it perhaps that these things that we see, especially if you're part of like this truth or conspiracy realm, right? You've been in this game for however many years. You go, things seem to be getting exponentially worse. And then I would pose the question, are they getting worse for a reason though? Um, because it seems to me that humans on an individual level are getting worse, and then these scary times are getting worse as a result of it. Um, I would say that when humans let themselves become so apathetic that they won't speak to anybody in a grocery store, like I said earlier, there is no human connection anymore. There is no genuine community. And then the community that does exist is, in large part online communities, online cults that are preying on people, that are engaging in things like doxing and publicly shaming people, and libel and slander and blackmail and extortion and all these things. It's a lot of evil that is taking place on a personal level within people's own hearts. And I would guess that things like, the corona spell that happened are an opportunity for us to remember humanity and like compassion and empathy, to shock people on an individual level into really letting go of all of those things, that are detrimental and toxic and traumatizing and hurtful to other people. And then, you know, by association, society at large, because when you hurt somebody, you're hurting society because that person is part of society. Um, I would say that these things are becoming worse because we're becoming worse. And I think that that's also reflected in, society in general, like with the transmission movement. People really like to, be very cruel to people in that movement. And then there are other people who like to attribute all of its power to George Soros, who's funding all these and I go, or it's people being cruel to other people. And these wounds are so deep in these people that they go, I need somebody to see me. Anybody, please see me because I'm drowning. I can't function. I hate my life. I need somebody to see me. So some hair gets dyed and some body parts get cut off because they're so desperate for any amount
Love.
of love, any amount of love. And then what is typically our response to that? Call them disgusting, call them anything except for love is what they're given. So I would say think about that. Next time, I don't know, next time you want to join a cult, is it centered on love and helping other people and, genuinely making a positive impact in this world, or is it focused on, tearing other people down? Because I think that might be the reason
Mm,
that we just had to endure what we had to endure for 3 years, is because, I mean, you go online, message boards, threads, comment sections, group chats, everything. It doesn't matter what it is. There's people tearing each other down. There's a
yep.
UFC. I don't know if you guys know UFC. I watched it probably 15 years ago, but everybody knows who Brock Lesnar is. He's a freak monster of a man. His daughter just won some title in shot put or something, and there was a picture of him with his daughter, and she looks like him. And I opened the comments, thousands of comments. Oh my God, that's a dude. The apple doesn't far fall from the tree. Just like ripping on this teenage girl because she looks like her dad. Her dad is wildly successful in UFC and WWE, and she's a high school girl. And I just go, I have daughters. My God, I don't know how I would be able to cope if I saw people doing that to my daughters. And then I think, like my wife, we grew up in a time where the internet was still pretty new. We had like MySpace back then. Facebook wasn't even a thing, right? But like, imagine if she were on the internet, there's a picture of her on the internet, and then just thousands of people saying hurtful shit towards her. And I saw that this morning. I saw that post and I was like, this is a perfect time to see this, going into talking about healing and stuff, is we really need to start
Mm.
extending a lot more love and compassion to people, because there's a lot of people who are really hurting. Um, and being an asshole
Ab-
does not make anything better.
Absolutely. And I concur with all the things you said. The whole if God is good topic, we could talk about that for hours. But like the I can just try to make it short. And I would say that you can't have any growth without a challenge. And when things get so messy and ugly, call it evil if you will, but that is a catalyst. Use it for growth. I'm pretty sure that's the intention. I'm pretty sure that's the point. you know, if you don't use it for growth, what are you doing? You're not healing. You're just stuck in a spiral. And hopefully, maybe one day you can get out.
Any good parent does not start at 100. They don't start screaming at their child if their child does something wrong. You know, it's gentle. First it's teaching, and then it's gentle reminders, and then it's maybe a little bit more stern, and then it's a progression of poor behavior, and then whatever punishment or reprimanding has to fit that behavior. So if you think about the relationship between humans and God, uh, it would make sense that these big things that are happening in society and in the world are getting worse because we're getting worse.
Yeah, or I would say
Yep.
the culture maybe is getting worse, not maybe everybody. But I know,
Yeah, definitely not every person, but just like culture, society in general. Yeah.
and as
Mm-hmm.
these things happen, more people wake up, I think, too, which is
Mm-hmm.
it filters people.
Right. I mean, we noticed a lot of those things happening in 2020. Lots of people coming to their senses about things and
That's that pendulum swing. Yeah.
realizing what is important.
Yep.
Yeah. And being good to people is important.
Absolutely. Love,
It's
that's
it's
one
it's
thing.
not a sign of weakness, despite what your cult leader might tell you. Being a compassionate person is not a sign of weakness at all.
Yeah, I think what happens, I'll throw this in quickly because I know we're about to wrap up, but it was like this with me where I thought I was the center of the universe, even if it was subconsciously. I just looked at everything that happened or that was going to happen as, how can I benefit from this? And not even maybe that maliciously, is more like, how can I have a good time? Or how am I going to stay happy with this thing? Or how am I going to be happy? What outcome, right, will make me happy? Now I kind of look at it as, um like what's gonna be better, what kind of like the what would Jesus thing do, right? Like, but what's gonna be better for everybody? And again, that that whole thought can be taken out to its extreme, then you end up with like communism or whatever, right? But just on an individual personal level, you take it situation by situation and just remember you're not the center of the universe. But it's not that I don't understand why people have that frame of mind that think they're the center of the universe, because basically that's all they've ever known. You only know your own experience, and everything around you, especially with TV and movies and everything being so prevalent, you kind of think you're like in your own movie, right? This is a movie about Brandon. How are we going to go along? But then once you realize we're all in this together, um, I think it helps a lot.
Mm-hmm. And in the sense of like, yeah, you do need to give yourself the attention that you need. And that's the care and the healing that you need. And that's very important. So it's not about like, oh, everybody's more important than me. So it's a balance, right?
Yeah, that's the other side of the token, right?
You're
So
right.
And
Self-love and healing, the appropriate healing that you need and the self-love that you need so that you can be loving and compassionate to others. Again, because if you don't know how to do that for yourself, you probably won't know how to do it for anyone else.
And
You'll be
to
doing it from a different place, not from a true place of love and compassion. You'll
to
be
bring
doing it from a place of acceptance and validation and, how am I going to get brownie points, that kind of thing.
yeah, to bring it back to my very opening thing, um, where I said I liked that quote in the beginning because it created this false binary and it simplified something to make, and in the process of simplifying something, it opens up so many more doors of thought.
Mm-hmm.
What Brandon just said, where he said, "We're all in this together."
Mm-hmm.
Was that not the slogan of the last 3 years?
Yeah, it really was.
And how much anger did that spark in people?
Yeah.
That's a very true, beautiful statement. We're in this together. Let's help each other. And the cultural response to that was anger.
Mm-hmm.
So it's it's very, very it's very telling of where we are as a culture when something that is a universal truth like that sparks such outrage in people.
Indeed.
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 All right.
Shall
Well,
we put a fork in it?
yeah, I was going to say, let's give a shout out to the chat. Thank you guys for hanging out to the end. We appreciate you so much. And the best way to support us is to be here every Thursday when we premiere these or go live. Make sure you hit thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell so you know when we put out new stuff. And you can go to morelawsmoreproblems.com if you'd like to support us even further than just hanging out here. There's several ways to support us financially there, so you can do that. And yeah, I don't know. You have anything to add, Sharon?
I think that's it. Shout out to the chat. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening
Yeah,
to
and
the
thank you
end.
for coming on again and oversharing with us. It's even though you think you were talking too much, like Sharon and I always say, it's great because we're letting you do the work,
Well,
So
I think we talked a lot more this time.
yeah.
Did
We
we?
waited. Yeah, it was good
It
though.
was great. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, it was a really good balance of all these ideas. And again, we're not making claims, everybody. We're trying to point out some similarities with things we've seen and lived through with what's going on and what's happened in the past and what can happen in the future. So
We're all very, very good at pattern recognition here.
yeah, that's really what it is. Yeah, exactly. Awesome.
Indeed.
All right. Well, what else? You guys can check us out. We're on Podbean if you just want to hear this through the audio. And yeah, if you have any comments, please make sure you leave them below. And if you're gonna get hateful and stuff with your comments, like we're just like, all right, because that's not what we're about here. Obviously, you guys,
Brandon has a button for that.
yeah, I do. If you want to talk
It's
about
called
my
the
beautiful
delete button.
hair, you can talk about my beautiful hair all day, but you want to start hating it. And the thing is, too, when people leave hateful comments, I'm just like, all right, whatever. Now I'm like, I gotta delete this. Like, I don't even
It
feel.
would be pretty ironic for someone to leave a hateful comment after what we just talked about.
Well,
But
that would mean they probably didn't listen this far into the show, I would imagine.
No,
this is
exactly.
true.
Or at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, awesome. Thanks again, everybody, for checking us out. And thank you, Nick, for coming on. And thank you, Sharon, for being such a lovely co-host.
Oh,
Thank you
thank
guys.
you. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Happy Green Day.
Oh, yeah. We all got our green on, right? Yeah, exactly. And happy holidays, whatever you guys
Yeah.
celebrate out there. And remember, don't ruin your family holiday just because they believe space is real. It's fine. Let them think it. There's a
Yeah.
lot of cool things
And
out there. Maybe it is real.
this
I don't know. I've never been there.
this episode airs right before Christmas. So
Ooh.
Merry Christmas,
That's
whatever
it, Sharon.
holiday
You're
you
out of the cold. I
celebrate.
told you, no Christmas. You're
You're
out.
gone.
It's the over. Brandon's good
Gone.
It's
now.
over.
Oh, the one last thing I
Uh,
did want to say is we need somebody. So, Nick, in your background, you have the tree there. There's a light that's been flashing. We need somebody to
yeah.
decode it, like through Morse code, to see if it's like saying anything. Because of the energy, that'd be
Yes.
amazing if it was just like, you guys are so on, keep talking or whatever.
It's a that's so funny. Longitude and
Help,
latitude
save
to my
me.
new secret cult location.
Yeah, exactly. Did it. So if you listen this long, guys, you got the secret. You got to go look up some Morse code and decode
That's
that.
so
And
funny.
if you figure it out, leave it in the comments. All right. What do we say to the good people, Sharon?
that once you start over Sharon,
then you totally stop being a Karen. And remember, we're
that
not. What? Wait, what? Did I
that
say
was
that?
delayed.
Oh, and you totally stop being a Karen. I wanted to use that silence, get people really into being enthralled. Anyway,
Yeah.
and remember, we're not trying to tell you how to live.
But maybe just to give you some ideas about how to live a little more simply, perhaps.
Exactly. All right, everybody. We'll see you next week. Take care.
Bye. Merry
Merry
Christmas.
Christmas. Happy New Year.